Hi, I'm Umbreon Libris, and I am a Pokemon YouTuber, but as you can see, books are a big part of my set. If you're new here, you may not realize that the Libris part of my name actually comes from the Latin word for book or for library. And besides Pokemon, books are my big passion in life. I've always been a big reader, but I also work with books professionally. I'm a book designer and typesetter, and I've also edited a few books myself. Some of these books on the set here are actually books that I worked on myself, including this edition of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is why it gets the spotlight. I haven't written any books yet, but that's one day. We've all been in various degrees of physical distancing or lockdown for a few weeks, so I thought some of you might appreciate a few more sources of entertainment. Here are a few book recommendations specifically for Pokemon fans. If you are also a fan of both Pokemon and books, leave your own recommendations in the comments. I'll make sure to check some of them out. If you are a Pokemon fan, there's a good chance you're interested in mythical creatures, so my first recommendation is The Book of Imaginary Beings by Jorge Luis Borges and Margarita Guerrero, although her name does not appear on the cover. If you can read Spanish, I would recommend you read the original, but this edition that I have is from 2006. It was illustrated by Peter Sis and translated by Andrew Hurley. This book is like a very weird Pokédex. It's got short descriptions, no more than 2 or 3 pages, of over 100 mythical and folkloric creatures from around the world. It's got everything from really famous creatures like the Sphinx or the Griffin to really obscure ones like the Mother of Tortoises, which is supposed to be a tortoise that is made of either fire and water or starlight from ancient China. It even includes some creatures from relatively modern fiction like the Eloy and Morlocks from The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. But what really drew me to this book is that even though many of the entries are sourced, so you know where Borges and Guerrero got them, many are not. And some of those, if you try to look up the creature online, the only reference to them is in this book, or references back to this book. So even the folklore is sometimes made up. Now that's a real Pokédex. If you've seen the movie Arrival, you might be familiar with this next one, Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is a book of science fiction short stories, and the story that gives the title to the collection, Story of Your Life, is what the movie Arrival is based on. I read this because I was interested in the movie, but I read it before watching the movie, and I loved both, but as they say, the book is better. And this book is not just that one story. The other stories explore themes of religion and spirituality and belief systems, from Christianity all the way to mathematics, but always in a really unique science fictional way. So this recommendation is for all of you Sinnoh stans out there who are interested in the intersection of religion and mythology with science fiction. This is some of the best science fiction I've ever read. It blew my mind in many different ways. Ted Chiang actually has a more recent collection called Exhalation, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. It is on my to-be-read pile, and I'm really excited. But I also wanted to recommend this book to highlight short stories. I think most people that read fiction read novels, and not as many people read the shorter forms, but short stories and novellas are just as, if not more, valuable. Argentine writer Julio Cortázar once wrote that the novel always wins by points, but the short story must win by a knockout. Which is a powerful and apt comparison to boxing. If you don't have the time or the attention span to read a novel, try short stories. This here is the book that I really wanted to recommend with this video, Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. This isn't my favorite book. It's not even my favorite book by China Mieville, but it might be the single most important book in shaping my current tastes. I read it back when I was in high school around 2005, and those of you who knew me back then will remember how obsessed I was with this book. Every person I ever shared it with loved it as well. This isn't even my original copy because I shared it so much that the other copies started to fall apart. I was already a huge Pokemon fan when I first read it, and I think that that's part of the reason it appealed so much to me. There's a lot of overlap with Pokemon. Mieville created a completely new fantasy world filled with amazing creatures and humanoid races, and he pulls a lot from real-world mythology. For example, one of the main characters is a Garuda, which is sort of a human-eagle hybrid from Hindu mythology. Another one is a Khepri, which is based on the scarab-headed Egyptian god. But he also invents incredible new creatures like the slake moth, which is sort of like a cross between a moth and a xenomorph from Alien, and it eats dreams. But this isn't straight up fantasy like The Lord of the Rings, which is not a genre that I'm super into. This is science fantasy, which, as the name implies, is a hybrid genre. It is fantasy, but it approaches the magical elements through the lens of science fiction. The magic is logical and technical and could be described somewhat scientifically, which to me, growing up with generations 1 and 2 of Pokemon, is the perfect genre for Pokemon to fall into. Early Pokemon had a much stronger science fantasy bend than it does now, and last week when I was wishing that Pokemon explored more of the technical aspects of Infinity Energy and Z-Power and Dynamax Energy, this is why. This is what I love to see and read. It's what I wish Pokemon was, or was more of. It is still a bit science fantasy-ish now. But back to Perdita Street Station. Something that I love about Mieville's writing is that he treats you as a native to his fantasy world. He doesn't bother telling you what wormen are, because that would be like telling you what a dog is. You mostly get a picture of these creatures through characters interacting with them, and there are even several creatures and even humanoid races that are just barely described, or not at all, they're just named, and to me, that is mwah! The story itself is also pretty interesting. It's about a scientist who researches flight, and he is approached by the Garuda, whose wings were cut off, and he's asked to find a way for the Garuda to be able to fly again, even without wings. The plot unfolds kind of slowly at first, but by the time you get about halfway through, you won't be able to put it down. And if you like this book, there are 2 other books that take place in the same universe, The Scar and Iron Council. They have some connections to Perdita Street Station, but they're not direct sequels. They're not continuations of the same story with the same characters or anything like that. Which, again, is a lot like what Pokemon games used to be. Very connected, but not direct sequels. Alright, just to wrap this up, this is sort of a bonus mini recommendation, mostly for my fellow creators out there, although for everyone else as well. An absolutely remarkable thing by Hank Green. Hank is very well known in YouTube land, and this book was #1 in the New York Times bestseller list for a while, so there's a good chance you've already heard of it. But this is one of the most exciting books that I read last year. It's science fiction that feels very contemporary. It's largely about being an internet personality, and even with a small audience like I have, I was still able to relate and see some aspects of this job very well depicted here. I hope you'll check out some of these books. I know things are really crazy right now, so you may not be able to get books the way that you normally would, but many libraries and independent bookstores around the world are still open and taking phone or online orders and can deliver it to you, so you can get physical books still. Or if you prefer, ebooks and audiobooks are just as accessible as ever. If you're looking for more recommendations, check the comments for what other people are suggesting, or tell me what you like, and I'll see what I can come up with. Obviously, I have read and have loved many more books than what I could fit into this video. Thank you for watching, and thank you to my patrons, especially luxury patron Ethan Saffron. I'm Umbreon Libris. Support your local libraries, support your local independent bookstores, don't buy from Amazon, and I'll see you in the next chapter.
You're so deep then you're talking about books.